Dad, you slept with my wife." The words cut through the charity gala like a gunshot. 200 people in the Chicago ballroom went silent. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. Chloe's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes went wide, darting between Ethan and Robert like a trapped animal looking for an exit that didn't exist. Robert's face turned the color of old newspaper. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Outside, November rain hammered against the windows. Inside, the silence stretched so long it became painful. Then Ethan spoke again, his voice calm as death itself. "There is no family money. Only my money. This man doesn't own a thing. He's just another employee I was paying, and he's just been fired for gross misconduct." Chloe's champagne glass slipped from her fingers. It shattered against the marble floor, the sound impossibly loud in the frozen room. That's when she understood what she'd done, who she'd betrayed, and what it was going to cost her. But to understand how they ended up here, you have to go back to where the lie began. Ethan grew up in Cicero, in the kind of neighborhood where people minded their business and kept their heads down. His mother Marie worked nights at St. Anthony's Hospital. His father Robert worked construction when he could keep a job, which wasn't often. Their apartment had 2 bedrooms and walls thin enough to hear everything the neighbors did. Ethan did his homework at a kitchen table that wobbled. The lamp flickered. The radiator clanged and hissed but never got quite warm enough. Robert was different back then, quieter. He'd come home with paint on his hands or dust in his hair, sit in front of the TV with a beer and not say much. There was something in his eyes Ethan noticed even as a kid, something defeated, something hungry. Marie never complained. She'd work 12-hour shifts, come home exhausted, and still find the energy to ask Ethan about school, about his grades, about what he was reading. "You're going to do something important," she'd tell him, her hand touching his cheek. "I know it. You're different." Ethan believed her because he had to, because the alternative was unthinkable. He was 12 when he built his first computer from parts salvaged from the electronics recycling center near the train tracks. He'd ride his bike there after school, dig through bins of discarded motherboards and hard drives, teach himself from library books and internet forums. Robert would walk past his bedroom and see the mess of wires and circuit boards. "That's not real work," he'd say. "You should learn a trade." But Ethan kept building, kept learning. By 16, he was freelancing, fixing computers for neighbors who paid him $20 cash. By 18, he'd saved enough for community college. That's when everything changed. Robert lost his construction job. The details were murky. Something about showing up late, arguments with the foreman. Marie picked up extra shifts, but it wasn't enough. The rent went unpaid. The electricity got cut off for 3 days in January. Ethan made a decision. He dropped out of community college, got a full-time job at a tech repair shop, started funneling every spare dollar into keeping the lights on. "Just until Dad finds something," Marie said, her eyes tired. "Just temporary." It wasn't temporary. Robert stopped looking for work. He'd sit at home, watching TV, drinking beer, complaining about how the world had screwed him over, how nobody appreciated skilled workers anymore, how everything was rigged against guys like him. Ethan worked, came home, worked more, built websites on the side, taught himself to code, slept 4 hours a night. Marie got sick when Ethan was 22. Pneumonia that turned into something worse. The hospital bills piled up fast. Insurance covered some of it. Not enough. Ethan worked 70-hour weeks, sold everything he owned except his laptop, moved back home to save on rent. Robert didn't visit Marie much in the hospital. Said it was too depressing. Said he couldn't handle seeing her like that. Marie died on a Tuesday in March. Snow was falling outside her window. She squeezed Ethan's hand and told him she was proud, that she knew he'd do something important. Then she was gone. The funeral was small. Robert cried, but there was something performative about it. something that made Ethan's jaw clench. After, Robert sat Ethan down at the kitchen table. "We need to talk about money," Robert said. "The medical bills, the funeral. I can't cover it on my own." Ethan looked at his father, really looked at him, saw the calculation in his eyes, the entitlement. "I'll handle it," Ethan said quietly. "Good, that's good. Because I've been thinking. Maybe it's time I retired. Let you take care of things for a while." Something cold settled in Ethan's chest, but he didn't say anything, just nodded. Robert was 51 years old. He'd just decided his son would bankroll the rest of his life. Ethan buried himself in work. The pain of losing Marie was too big to look at directly, so he didn't. He coded until his eyes burned, took on every freelance project he could find, built websites, designed apps, solved problems other developers couldn't crack. He was good, better than good. Within a year, he'd saved enough to rent a tiny studio in Logan Square. It was barely bigger than a closet, but it was his, the first space that belonged only to him. Robert called every week, sometimes twice a week, always with the same question. "Can you spot me some cash, just until I get back on my feet?" Ethan always said yes, sent money through Venmo or Zelle. 200 here, 500 there. It added up fast. But something was happening with Ethan's career, something he didn't fully understand yet. A startup in Seattle reached out. They'd seen his work on GitHub, wanted to hire him as a senior developer. The salary made his hands shake when he saw the offer letter. More money than his mother had made in a year, maybe 2 years. He accepted, packed everything he owned into 2 suitcases, flew west. Seattle was gray and wet and nothing like Chicago. But the work was incredible, challenging in ways that made him feel alive. The team was small, brilliant, hungry. They were building financial software, tools for managing complex investment portfolios. It was boring to most people, but Ethan saw the potential immediately. He worked 18-hour days, lived on coffee and takeout. His apartment was empty except for a mattress on the floor and his laptop setup. He didn't need anything else. The company grew. Their software started getting attention. Big clients, banks, hedge funds. Robert kept calling. The amounts got bigger. 1,000, 2,000, sometimes 5. "Just temporary," Robert always said. "I'm figuring things out." Ethan sent the money, every time. He told himself it was what Marie would have wanted, taking care of family, being loyal. But there was another reason, too. One he didn't like to examine too closely. Sending money meant Robert didn't visit, didn't show up asking for more, didn't intrude on the life Ethan was building. It was worth the price. The startup got acquired when Ethan was 27. The payout was significant, more money than he'd imagined possible. He could have stopped working, retired, traveled the world. Instead, he started his own company. Next Gen Financial Technologies started in a shared office space in downtown Seattle. Just Ethan and 2 other developers he'd worked with at the startup. They built software that used machine learning to predict market trends, to automate trading strategies, to make investing smarter and faster. The work was brutal. They'd launch a feature and it would break, fix it and find 3 new bugs, pitch to investors and get rejected, pitch again, get rejected again. Ethan's savings evaporated. He maxed out credit cards, ate ramen for months. Robert kept calling, kept asking for money. "I'm tight right now," Ethan would say. "Let me see what I can do." He'd send what he could, always less than Robert wanted, never enough to satisfy whatever hole Robert was trying to fill. Then they got their first major client, a wealth management firm in San Francisco willing to test their software. The contract was worth $200,000. It worked, better than anyone expected. The client signed a long-term deal, referred them to other firms. Word spread. Within 18 months, NextGen was profitable. Within 3 years, they had 40 employees and offices in Seattle, San Francisco, and New York. Ethan's personal worth climbed into the millions, then the tens of millions. He didn't tell Robert, didn't tell anyone, really. He lived in the same modest apartment, drove a 10-year-old Honda, wore jeans and hoodies to the office. But Robert started asking for more money. Bigger amounts, $10,000, $20,000. "I'm starting a business," Robert said over the phone. "Just need seed money to get going." Ethan sent it, knowing full well there was no business, knowing it would go toward rent on a nicer apartment, a newer car, restaurants and bars. It was easier than confronting the truth. His father was a parasite. Then Robert moved to Chicago, back to the city they'd left behind, but not to Cicero, to Gold Coast, to a luxury building with a doorman and lake views. "Made some smart investments," Robert told Ethan when they spoke. "Things are finally turning around." Ethan said nothing. Just kept sending money, monthly transfers now. 50,000, sometimes more. He told himself it was worth it to keep Robert at a distance, to maintain peace, to honor some vestigial obligation to family. But really it was guilt. Guilt that he'd escaped and Robert hadn't. Guilt that he had everything and couldn't bear to watch his father have nothing. So he funded an illusion. Let Robert play the successful businessman, the self-made man who'd finally figured it out. And Robert embraced the role completely. Ethan met Chloe at a tech conference in Chicago. He'd flown back for meetings, stayed an extra day for the conference. She was working registration, all bright smile and perfect posture. They talked in the hotel bar after. She was easy to talk to. Funny. She asked questions about his work, seemed genuinely interested. She was beautiful, but that wasn't what drew him. It was the way she looked at him. Like he was interesting. Like he mattered. They dated long distance for 6 months. He'd fly to Chicago every few weeks. She'd visit Seattle when she could. It felt natural, easy. She worked in marketing, she said, for a small firm downtown. The details were always vague, but Ethan didn't press. Everyone had parts of their life they kept private. He didn't tell her about NextGen, didn't mention the company at all. Introduced himself as a software developer, which was technically true. Let her assume he was comfortable but not wealthy. After a year, he asked her to move to Seattle. "There's nothing keeping me in Chicago," she said, smiling. "Let's do it." She moved into his apartment, the modest one in Capitol Hill. 2 bedrooms, small kitchen, nothing fancy. If she was disappointed, she hid it well. They got married at the courthouse 6 months later. Small ceremony. Just the 2 of them and a pair of witnesses they'd grabbed from the hallway. Ethan didn't invite Robert, didn't even tell him until a week after. "You got married?" Robert's voice on the phone sounded hurt. "Without telling me?" "It was last minute," Ethan said. "Nothing fancy. Still, I'm your father." Ethan felt the familiar guilt rising in his chest. "I know. I'm sorry. We'll do something to celebrate when I'm in Chicago next." "Yeah, sure." Robert paused. "I'd like to meet her. Your wife." "You will." They flew to Chicago a month later. Ethan had business meetings anyway, made sense to combine it with introducing Chloe to Robert. That's when everything started to crack. Robert had picked the restaurant, someplace expensive downtown, white tablecloths, wine list that required a sommelier. He was already seated when they arrived, standing to greet them, arms spread wide. "There's my son." Robert pulled Ethan into a hug that felt too theatrical, too performed. Then he turned to Chloe. "And you must be the woman who stole his heart." Chloe laughed. "Guilty." They sat. Robert ordered wine without looking at the prices, talked about the restaurant like he was a regular, dropped names of other places he'd been recently. All expensive, all impressive. Ethan watched Chloe's face, saw the interest sparking there, the calculations happening behind her eyes. Robert told stories about business deals, about investments that had paid off, about his penthouse on Lakeshore Drive. None of it was true, but Robert told the lies with such confidence that they sounded real. Chloe leaned forward, engaged, asked questions, laughed at his jokes. Ethan felt something cold forming in his stomach. After dinner, Robert suggested they see his place. "It's just a few blocks. Come up for a drink." The penthouse was ridiculous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, modern furniture, art on the walls that might have been original. Ethan knew exactly how much the rent cost. He was paying it. Chloe walked to the windows. "This view is incredible." "I do all right," Robert said, handing her a glass of scotch. They stayed for an hour. Robert showed them around: the study, the balcony, the master bedroom with its view of Navy Pier. On the way back to their hotel, Chloe was quiet. "Your dad's really successful," she finally said. Ethan looked out the taxi window. "He does okay." "More than okay. That penthouse probably costs, what, $10,000 a month?" "Something like that." "And you never mentioned he was that well off." Ethan shrugged. "Doesn't really matter." But he could feel it. The shift. Something had changed in how she looked at him. At Robert. They flew back to Seattle the next day. Life returned to normal. But Chloe brought up Robert more often, asked about the family finances, about inheritance, about Ethan's relationship with his father. "You two seem distant," she said one night over dinner. "Why don't you talk more?" "We talk enough. But he's family. And he's obviously done well for himself. Maybe he could give you business advice, help with your career." Ethan set down his fork. "My career is fine." "I just mean, you're still working as a developer. Your dad seems like he's really connected. Could open doors." There it was. The thing he'd been afraid of. She thought Robert was the success story, that Ethan was the also-ran son who'd never quite measured up. He should have corrected her, should have explained. But he didn't. Some part of him wanted to see where this went, wanted to know if his instinct was right. "Maybe," was all he said. Over the next few months, Chloe suggested visiting Chicago more often, wanted to have dinner with Robert again, started asking about family gatherings for the holidays. Ethan made excuses. Work was busy, travel was exhausting. They'd go soon. But Chloe went on her own. "A long weekend," she said. "Visit some friends from college." Ethan checked the credit card statement later. She'd stayed at a hotel, downtown, expensive. The same weekend, Robert's bank account showed charges from the same hotel. The bar. Room service. Ethan sat in his home office staring at the transaction logs, the timestamps, the locations. They matched perfectly. His wife and his father. Same hotel, same nights. He could have confronted them, called Chloe, demanded answers. Instead, he did what he did best. He gathered data. Over the next 3 months, Ethan watched the pattern repeat. Chloe would find reasons to visit Chicago. Robert would have charges at the same locations. Hotels, restaurants, sometimes his apartment. They were careful, but not careful enough. Ethan installed monitoring software on Chloe's phone. Legal, since it was on his family plan. Accessed her texts. The messages were damning. Not explicit, but clear enough. "Can't wait to see you next week." "Dinner at the penthouse? Just us?" "Ethan doesn't understand what we have." That last one made his jaw clench so hard he thought his teeth might crack. Robert's messages were worse. Feeding the lie, reinforcing the illusion. "He's always been the disappointment. You deserve better." "I've built an empire. He's just coasting. When the time is right, we'll make our move." Ethan read them all. Every message. Every lie. Let the rage build slowly, carefully, like pressure in a sealed container. He expanded his surveillance, hired a private investigator, got photos, timestamps, documentation of every meeting. They'd been sleeping together for 4 months, since that first trip Chloe made to Chicago to see friends. The investigator's report was thorough. Hotel rooms, dinners where they sat too close, walks along the lakefront holding hands. Robert was playing the role perfectly. The successful patriarch, the man who'd built something real, and Chloe had bought every word. She thought she was trading up, moving from the disappointing developer son to the wealthy father who could give her the life she wanted. Robert thought he was taking something that belonged to Ethan, proving he was still the alpha, still the man in charge. They were both wrong. But Ethan didn't confront them, didn't file for divorce, didn't cut off Robert's money. Instead, he started planning. If they wanted to destroy him, he'd let them think they were succeeding. He'd give them enough rope to hang themselves. And when the time was right, he'd pull everything out from under them. Not with violence, not with screaming, with the one thing Robert had never had and never would: real power. Ethan's company was worth $400 million. He owned 60% of it outright. His personal liquid assets were north of $100 million. He had investments, property, a portfolio that would make most hedge fund managers weep with envy. None of it was in his name. Next Gen Financial Technologies was owned by a holding company. That holding company was owned by a trust. The trust was managed by a law firm in Delaware. His name appeared nowhere in the public records. It was how he'd always operated. Privacy, discretion, letting the work speak for itself while remaining invisible. But it meant Chloe had no idea who she'd married. No idea what she was throwing away. And Robert? Robert thought the money came from nowhere, that Ethan was sending him checks from some generic software job, that his son was a sucker funding his retirement out of obligation. Neither of them had bothered to ask questions, to dig deeper, to wonder where the money actually came from. Now they'd pay for that ignorance. Ethan started by creating a shell, a fake financial crisis. He had his CFO generate reports showing NextGen was struggling, market conditions, competition, reduced revenue projections. None of it was true. The company was more profitable than ever, but the reports looked real, official. He had them leaked to industry blogs, trade publications. Rumors started spreading, whispers that NextGen might be in trouble. Then he made a call to Robert's bank. "I'm calling about the account for Robert Hayes. I'm the primary source of funds for that account. I need to update the status." The banking representative was professional, efficient. "What changes would you like to make?" "I'm reducing my support. Financial difficulties. I wanted to make sure you had updated income projections for any credit extensions." "I see. And the new income level?" "0. Silence on the line. "0? That's correct. I'll be making my final transfer this month. After that, Mr. Hayes will need to support himself." The representative made notes, asked standard questions. Ethan answered them all truthfully, then hung up. The next call was to Robert's landlord, the luxury building management company. "I'm calling about the lease for Robert Hayes in Unit 4702. I'm the guarantor on that lease. I need to inform you I'll be withdrawing my guarantee effective immediately." More questions, more documentation. Ethan provided everything they needed. Then he waited. Robert noticed within days. His credit card got declined at a restaurant. He called Ethan, voice tight with panic. "Something's wrong with my accounts. Can you look into it?" "What kind of wrong?" "I don't know. Transactions aren't going through. The bank is asking questions about income verification." Ethan kept his voice neutral. "Maybe there's a fraud flag. Have you called them?" "Of course I called them. They're being weird, asking about my employment, my income sources." "What did you tell them?" "That I'm semi-retired, that I have investments." "And?" "They want documentation, tax returns, proof of assets." Robert's voice dropped. "Ethan, I need you to send some extra money this month, enough to cover the questions." "How much?" "50,000 should do it. Maybe 75 to be safe." Ethan looked at his computer screen, at the file labeled Evidence, at the photos of Robert and Chloe at dinner, walking, entering his apartment together. "Sure," he said. "I'll send it." He didn't. Instead, he made another call to the IRS, an anonymous tip about unreported income, about a man living beyond his declared means, about potential tax evasion. The audit notice arrived at Robert's address within 3 weeks. Then Ethan called the management company for Robert's building. I'm formally rescinding my guarantee on the lease for Robert Hayes. Per Section 12 of the guarantee agreement, I'm providing 30 days' notice. After that, Mr. Hayes will need to qualify for the lease on his own merit. The management company was apologetic but firm. Without your guarantee, Mr. Hayes will need to provide proof of income equal to 40 times the monthly rent. I understand. That would be $400,000 annually. I'm aware. Just to confirm, you understand this may result in lease termination? I do. Ethan hung up and made one more call to his lawyer. I need you to prepare something for me, a complete financial statement, every company I own, every asset, every account, all of it. The lawyer paused. That's a lot of exposure, Ethan. Are you sure? I'm sure. I want it comprehensive, undeniable, and I want it ready in 2 weeks. Can I ask why? You'll see. Chloe noticed something was off. She'd become attuned to Robert's moods, apparently. Spent enough time with him to recognize when he was stressed. Is your dad okay? She asked one night over dinner. Ethan looked up from his laptop. Why? I don't know. He seems worried about something. Did something happen with his business? Not that I know of. Maybe you should call him. Check in. Ethan met her eyes. Saw the concern there. The genuine care for a man she was sleeping with behind her husband's back. Maybe, he said. She went back to her phone, texting someone. Probably Robert. Probably telling him Ethan was asking questions. Let them worry. Let them scramble. The pressure was building exactly how he wanted it. Robert called that night. Late. His voice was different, scared. Ethan, we need to talk. Something's going on. What do you mean? My accounts, the lease, the bank. Everything's falling apart at once. It doesn't make sense. Have you done something wrong? No, of course not. But someone's targeting me, asking questions, digging into my finances. That's concerning. Concerning? It's a nightmare. I got a notice from the IRS. They want to audit 3 years of returns. Do you have your records organized? Silence. Robert? It's complicated. The way I've structured things. Some of it might look unusual. Unusual how? Just unusual. Look, can you help me out? I need a loan, something to get me through this. 50,000, 100,000. I'll pay you back when this settles down. I don't have that kind of cash right now. What? Yes, you do. You always have it. The company's going through a rough patch. I'm tapped out. Robert's breathing got heavier on the line. You're lying. Excuse me? I said you're lying. You've always had money. You've been sending me cash for years. Don't pretend you're broke now. Ethan's voice went cold. Those transfers? Those were me being generous. Helping out family? That stops when I can't afford it anymore. Generous? You think you're generous? You've been throwing me scraps while you live your comfortable life. Scraps? Robert, I've sent you nearly $3 million over the last 5 years. Silence, long and heavy. What? 3 million, give or take. I have the records if you want them. That's not possible. It's very possible. It's also finished. Figure it out on your own. Ethan hung up before Robert could respond. Then he blocked the number. Let it sink in. Let Robert realize what he'd just lost. Phase 1 complete. The building management gave Robert notice after 30 days. Without a guarantor and without proof of income, they couldn't extend his lease. He had 60 days to vacate. The bank froze his credit cards. The IRS audit moved forward. Every financial hole Robert had been papering over with Ethan's money suddenly gaped open. Robert moved to a cheaper apartment, not in Gold Coast, not even close. Somewhere in Lakeview in a walk-up building with a broken elevator. He called Ethan's number daily. It went straight to voicemail. He sent emails, texts to Chloe asking her to intercede. Chloe tried. I think you should talk to your dad. He's really struggling. He'll figure it out, Ethan said without looking up from his laptop. He's your father. Is he? Something in his tone made her stop, made her look at him differently. What does that mean? It means exactly what it sounds like. She didn't push further, but she visited Chicago more often, sometimes for an entire week, always with excuses about job opportunities, about networking. Ethan let her go, let her run to Robert, let them huddle together in his diminished circumstances, wondering what had happened to the golden goose. The private investigators' reports kept coming. Robert and Chloe were still together, still meeting. But the dynamic had shifted. The photos showed arguments, tension. Robert looked diminished now, haggard. Good. Ethan waited, watched, let them stew in their confusion and growing desperation. And then he made his move. The charity gala was Robert's last gasp at maintaining appearances. Some fundraiser for a children's hospital, $200 tickets. He'd probably bought his on credit, hoping to network his way back to relevance. Ethan bought a table, sponsored at the platinum level, $200,000, made sure his name was in the program, made sure Robert would see it. He flew Chloe to Chicago for it. Company event, he told her. Thought you might enjoy it. She seemed excited, probably thinking it was a chance to show off, to be seen. They arrived separately from Robert, but Ethan had positioned their table strategically. Clear line of sight, close enough to make eye contact. Robert saw them almost immediately. His face went through several emotions at once. Shock, anger, something that might have been fear. Chloe saw him too. Went pale, looked at Ethan like she was trying to figure out if this was coincidence or design. The evening proceeded. Dinner, speeches, silent auction. Ethan played the gracious donor, smiled, made small talk, donated another $50,000 on the spot to enthusiastic applause. He watched Robert watching him, saw the calculations happening, the confusion. Chloe excused herself to the restroom. Robert followed a few minutes later. They met near the bar. Ethan couldn't hear the conversation, but their body language told the story. Urgent whispers. Robert grabbing her arm, Chloe pulling away. When she came back to the table, her hands were shaking. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked. "Fine." "You seem upset." "I'm fine." The gala continued. Then came the moment Ethan had orchestrated, the moment he'd spent months building toward. The hospital president took the stage for closing remarks, thanked the major donors by name. When she got to Ethan's name, she paused. "I want to especially thank Ethan Hayes, founder and CEO of NextGen Financial Technologies, for his extraordinarily generous support tonight. Mr. Hayes, would you stand?" The room applauded. Ethan stood, gave a modest wave. Chloe's face was a mask of confusion. "CEO, NextGen Financial Technologies," the president continued. "Many of you may not know that NextGen is one of the most successful fintech companies in the country, with operations across 3 continents. Mr. Hayes, your commitment to giving back is truly inspiring." More applause. Ethan sat down. Chloe leaned over, her voice barely a whisper. "You're a CEO?" "I thought you knew." "You said you were a software developer." "I am. Among other things." Her eyes were wild now, scanning the program, finding his name, the company name, the donation amount. Across the room, Robert was standing, walking toward their table. His face was red, his hands clenched. "Here we go," Ethan thought. Robert reached the table as dessert was being served. He didn't sit, just stood there, looming. "Ethan, we need to talk." "About what?" "You know what?" His voice was too loud. People at nearby tables were looking. "Keep your voice down. Don't tell me what to do. You owe me an explanation." Ethan set down his fork, looked up at his father with calm, dead eyes. "I don't owe you anything." "Like hell you don't. You cut me off, destroyed my credit, got me evicted, And now I find out you're some big-shot CEO? Robert laughed, but it was ugly, bitter. You've been lying to me. No, you've been lying to yourself. What's that supposed to mean? Ethan stood. He was taller than Robert, hadn't realized it until now. When had that happened? It means you never asked where the money came from, never wondered, just took it and spent it and acted like you'd earned it. You're my son. You're supposed to help. I did help, for years, and you used that help to seduce my wife. The words dropped like bombs. The nearby tables went silent. Chloe made a small sound, a whimper. Robert's face went through several colors. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, you do. Ethan pulled out his phone, swiped to a folder, held it up so Robert could see. Photos, messages, time stamps, all of it. Robert's hands started to shake. Where did you get those? Doesn't matter. What matters is that you've been sleeping with my wife for 6 months, using my money to fund your little affair, playing the successful father figure while I bankrolled every dinner, every hotel room, every lie. People were definitely watching now. The gala had gone quiet. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. Chloe was crying, mascara running down her face. Ethan, please. Not here. Where else? He turned to her. You thought you were trading up, didn't you? Thought Robert was the real success story? The man with the penthouse and the business and the money? I didn't. Yes, you did. You looked at him and saw wealth. Looked at me and saw a disappointment. Someone not living up to his potential. That's not true. Isn't it? Ethan's voice was still calm, still level, scarier for how little emotion it contained. You told him I didn't understand what you two had, that I was just coasting, that he deserved you. Her face crumpled. How do you know that? I know everything. Every text, every call, every hotel room, I've known for months. Robert found his voice. If you knew, why didn't you say something? Why the games? Because I wanted to see how far you'd go, how much you'd take, and you didn't disappoint. So what? This is what, revenge? You ruined my life over some woman? The slap came before Ethan realized his hand was moving, sharp, loud. Robert's head snapped to the side. Don't you dare, Ethan said, his voice finally showing emotion, finally cracking. Don't you dare call her some woman. She's my wife. And you're my father. You were supposed to be someone I could trust. Robert touched his face. His eyes were watering. From pain or shame, Ethan couldn't tell. I want my money back, Robert said quietly. Whatever you took, whatever you froze, I want it back. There is no money. Bullshit. You just donated $200,000 like it was nothing. My money. Not yours, not family money, mine. We're family. That makes it ours. And there it was, the entitlement, the belief that Ethan's success was somehow communal property, something Robert had a right to claim. Ethan stepped closer, close enough that Robert had to tilt his head back slightly to maintain eye contact. Dad, you slept with my wife. The room was silent. 200 people holding their breath. There is no family money, only my money. This man doesn't own a thing. He's just another employee I was paying, and he's just been fired for gross misconduct. Chloe's champagne glass slipped from her fingers. It shattered against the marble floor. Robert's mouth opened, closed. What? The penthouse? I paid for it. The car? Mine. The restaurants, the clothes, the lifestyle you used to seduce my wife, all funded by me? You don't have a business, you don't have investments, you have nothing except what I gave you. That's a lie. Ethan pulled out another document, handed it to Robert. That's every transaction I've made to your accounts over the last 5 years, $3.2 million, all documented, all traceable, all mine. Robert's hand shook as he looked at the pages. His face went from red to gray. Chloe was staring at Ethan like she'd never seen him before. You're a millionaire? 100-millionaire, actually, give or take? But you live in that apartment. You drive that car. Because I don't need to prove anything to anyone. He looked at Robert. Unlike some people. Robert crumpled the papers. You can't do this. You're my son. You owe me. I owe you? Ethan laughed, and it was a terrible sound. I owe the man who barely worked a day in his life? Who let my mother kill herself with overtime while he sat on the couch drinking beer? Who took my money and used it to betray me in the worst possible way? I gave you life. No. You gave me DNA. Mom gave me life. She's the one who worked, who sacrificed, who believed I could be something. You just took credit for it. Robert's eyes were wild now, desperate. I'll sue you. For the money. For cutting me off. Go ahead. I've got lawyers. Good ones. And every transaction was a gift. Freely given. You have no legal claim to anything. Then I'll tell everyone what you did. How you manipulated me. Used me. Tell them. I've got emails, messages, photos, documentation of everything, including your affair with my wife. You think that story ends well for you? Robert looked around, at the watching faces, at the phones that were definitely recording now, at his life imploding in real time. Please, his voice broke. Ethan, please. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Lots of mistakes. Years of them. I can fix this. We can fix this. Family is supposed to forgive. Family is supposed to be loyal. The silence stretched. Then Ethan turned to Chloe. She was still crying, mascara streaked, looking smaller somehow than she had an hour ago. I'll have divorce papers drawn up. You can keep whatever clothes you brought. Everything else stays. Ethan, wait. Can we talk about this? No. I made a mistake. I know I did. But we can work through this. Work through you sleeping with my father? She flinched. It wasn't supposed to happen. He understood me. He made me feel special. With my money. I didn't know it was your money. He said he was successful, that he'd built his own fortune. I thought... You thought you were trading up, dumping the disappointing developer for the rich dad. Her face confirmed everything. The funny part, Ethan continued, if you'd just asked me what I did for a living, if you'd shown any real interest in my work instead of his fake lifestyle, you'd have known. But you didn't care about me. You cared about what you thought he could give you. That's not fair, isn't it? When's the last time you asked about my day? About my company? About anything that mattered to me? She had no answer. Ethan looked at both of them, his father, his wife. Two people who'd looked at him and seen an opportunity to exploit. You deserve each other, he said quietly. Except you can't have each other now, can you? Because he's broke. And you're exposed. And everybody knows exactly what you both are. He turned and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted for him like water. Behind him, he heard Chloe calling his name, heard Robert shouting something about family and obligation. He didn't look back. Outside, November rain was falling harder. The cold felt good against his face. Clean. His phone buzzed, his lawyer. I saw the live stream. Someone was broadcasting on Instagram. Good. Good. Ethan, that was incredibly public. That was the point. Let everyone know. Let them see exactly who these people are. What do you need from me? Divorce papers, restraining order against both of them, and freeze Chloe's access to any joint accounts. Done. Anything else? Yeah. Set up a scholarship fund. At St. Anthony's Hospital. For kids of nurses. Full ride. Medical school, nursing school, whatever they need. How much? $5 million to start. In my mother's name. The lawyer was quiet for a moment. That's a good thing you're doing. It's what she would have wanted. Ethan hung up and stood in the rain for a while longer, let it soak through his jacket. Let it wash away the last 5 years of lying to himself about what his father was, about what his marriage had been. Then he got in his car and drove to the airport. He had a company to run, people who depended on him, real work that mattered. The rest of it, Robert, Chloe, their mutual destruction, would play out without him. He was done being their meal ticket. The story broke online within hours. Someone had recorded the entire confrontation, posted it on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. It went viral. Tech CEO exposes father and wife's affair at charity gala. Millionaire reveals he was secretly bankrolling father's fake lifestyle. The most savage public breakup of 2024. The comments were brutal. Toward Robert and Chloe, not Ethan. People recognized a particular kind of betrayal, a particular kind of exploitation. Robert's story came out piece by piece, his work history, his debts, the IRS audit, the eviction, every lie he'd told, every dollar he'd spent. Chloe tried to control the narrative, posted on Instagram about being deceived, about how she was a victim too. The internet didn't buy it. Screenshots of her messages to Robert surfaced, her own words condemning her. Within a week, she'd deleted all social media, moved back to wherever she'd come from originally. Wisconsin, Ethan thought, somewhere she could hide. Robert tried to sell his story, reached out to gossip blogs, tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, as Ethan being controlling and vindictive. Nobody was interested. The evidence was too clear, the financial records too damning. He ended up in a studio apartment in Aurora, working retail at a big box store, the kind of job he'd always said was beneath him. Karma had a sense of humor. Ethan didn't watch the fallout closely, didn't obsess over the comments or the think pieces or the hot takes. He went back to Seattle, back to work. Let the lawyers handle the divorce. Let Robert fade into obscurity. Next Gen kept growing. They opened a new office in London, hired another 100 employees. The software kept improving. The clients kept coming. Ethan moved into a bigger apartment, not a penthouse, just something with enough space for a home office and a decent view. He bought some art, actual art, not the rental stuff Robert had filled his place with. He dated occasionally, nothing serious, just people who knew who he was and didn't pretend otherwise. It was refreshing, uncomplicated. 6 months after the gala, his CFO knocked on his office door. Got a minute? Sure. We've been approached about an acquisition. Big number. Really big. How big? 800 million, for 70% of the company. Ethan did the math. His 60% stake would be worth roughly $500 million after taxes and fees. Who's offering? Goldman. They want to integrate our tech into their wealth management division. What do you think? I think it's a good offer, but I also think we could be worth twice that in 3 years if we keep growing. Ethan leaned back in his chair, looked out the window at the Seattle skyline, gray and wet and beautiful. Let's pass. You sure? Yeah. We built this. Let's see how far it can go. The CFO smiled. Figured you'd say that. After he left, Ethan sat in the silence. $500 million. Turned down without hesitation, because the money wasn't the point anymore. Maybe it never had been. The point was building something real, something that couldn't be taken away, something that didn't depend on anyone else's approval or support. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I'm sorry, I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it. Robert. Ethan stared at the message for a long time. Thought about responding. Thought about what he might say. In the end, he just deleted it. Some bridges weren't worth rebuilding. A year after the gala, Ethan was back in Chicago for business. He had a meeting with a potential client downtown. Finished early. Found himself walking through Cicero. The old neighborhood looked the same, maybe a little more run down. The apartment building where he'd grown up was still there. Same cracked steps, same rusted railing. He stood outside for a while, Remembered his mother coming home from those double shifts. Remembered doing homework at that wobbling table. Remembered the sound of his father's disappointed sighs. A kid walked past, maybe 12 years old, carrying a backpack covered in patches, looking at his phone. Ethan almost didn't do it, almost walked away. But then he thought of his mother, of what she'd want. "Hey," he called out. The kid stopped. Suspicious. "Yeah? You go to school around here?" "Maybe. Why? You good with computers?" "I guess." "Why?" Ethan pulled out a business card, wrote something on the back. "That's the address of a community center a few blocks from here. They run free coding classes on Saturdays. Tell them Ethan sent you." The kid looked at the card. "Who's Ethan?" "Someone who used to live here. Someone who got out." "How?" "By learning things people said weren't important. By not listening when people said I couldn't do it. By working harder than everyone around me thought was reasonable." The kid studied him. "You rich now?" "I do okay." "Cool." He pocketed the card. Started to walk away. Then stopped. "Thanks, I guess." "Don't thank me. Just show up. Do the work. The rest will follow." The kid nodded and left. Ethan stood there a while longer, then walked back to his car. He had dinner plans, meeting with an old colleague who was starting their own company. Wanted advice. Wanted mentorship. Ethan was happy to give it. That was the thing about success. The real kind, not the fake kind Robert had pretended to have. Real success created room for other people, created opportunities, created more success. His phone rang. His assistant. "Ethan, the St. Anthony's Scholarship Fund? They want to do a naming ceremony. Name the education wing after your mother. They're asking if you'll attend." He thought about it, about his mother, about nurses working double shifts to keep the lights on, about kids trying to learn at wobbling tables. Tell them yes, and ask them what else they need. Equipment, resources, whatever it is, we'll figure it out. "How much should I authorize?" "Whatever it takes." She laughed. "You say that a lot." "Because I mean it." He hung up and drove back downtown. The rain had started again. It always rained in Chicago in November, cold and relentless, and somehow beautiful anyway. At a stoplight, he saw his reflection in the rearview mirror. He looked different than he had a year ago. Older, maybe, but also lighter. Like he'd been carrying something heavy for years and had finally set it down. His father's approval, his wife's loyalty, the burden of other people's expectations and betrayals, all of it, gone. What remained was simpler, cleaner, his work, his company, his choice to build something that mattered. The light changed. He drove on. NextGen went public 3 years later. The IPO valued the company at $3.4 billion. Ethan's stake was worth just over $2 billion. The day of the IPO, he stood on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange and rang the bell. His employees cheered. The stock price surged. Journalists asked for comments. "This belongs to everyone who built this company," he told them. "Everyone who worked late nights, who believed in what we were creating, who didn't quit when things got hard. That's what creates value. Not luck, not inheritance, work." Someone asked about his father, about the viral video from 3 years ago. "No comment," Ethan said. And he meant it. Robert wasn't worth the breath. Later, after the celebration, after the dinner with his executive team, after all the congratulations and handshakes, Ethan sat alone in his hotel room overlooking Manhattan. His phone showed messages from people he hadn't heard from in years. Congratulations, questions about investment opportunities, requests for money. He ignored most of them. But there was one email that caught his attention, from Chloe. He almost deleted it without reading. But curiosity got the better of him. "Ethan, I saw the news about your IPO. Congratulations. You deserve it. I know I have no right to reach out. I know what I did was unforgivable. I've spent the last 3 years thinking about it. about how stupid I was, how I threw away something real for something fake. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not trying to get back into your life. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. What I lost. What you were building while I was too blind to see it. I'm sorry. For whatever that's worth. See. Ethan read it twice. Felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no lingering pain. Just emptiness where she used to live in his head. He closed the email without responding. Some things didn't deserve closure. Some people didn't deserve the satisfaction of knowing they'd been forgiven. His phone buzzed again. His CFO. Stock closed up 42%. We're the best performing IPO of the year. That's good. Good. Ethan, you're worth $2 billion. That's not good. That's incredible. It's a number. It's freedom. Ethan smiled. I've been free for 3 years. The number just makes it official. After he hung up, he looked out at the city. Millions of lights. Millions of people working. Building. Trying to make something of themselves. He thought about the kid in Cicero. About the scholarship students at St. Anthony's. About the employees at NextGen who'd just become millionaires themselves through their stock options. That was what mattered. Not revenge. Not proving people wrong. Creating opportunities that hadn't existed before. His mother would have understood that. Would have been proud. Robert wouldn't. But Robert had never understood anything that didn't directly benefit him. The last Ethan had heard, his father was still in Aurora. Still working retail. Still bitter about how unfair life was. Still believing he was the victim. Some people never learned. Never changed. Never took responsibility for the choices they made. Ethan had learned, had changed, had built something that would outlast any personal grudge or family drama. That was the real revenge, not the public humiliation, not the financial ruin, just living well, just succeeding without them, just proving that he'd never needed their belief or support to become exactly who he was meant to be. 5 years after the gala, Ethan sold another stake in NextGen. Reduced his ownership to 40%, walked away with another $1 billion. He used half of it to start a foundation, education programs, scholarships, small business loans for people from neighborhoods like Cicero, people who just needed someone to believe in them, to give them a chance. The other half he invested in other companies, startups run by founders who reminded him of himself, hungry, driven, building something that mattered. He was 38 years old, wealthy beyond anything he'd imagined as a kid doing homework at that wobbling table. But the wealth wasn't the point. It never had been. The point was the kid he'd been, the mother who'd worked herself to death, the promise he'd made to himself that he'd be different, that he'd build something real. He'd kept that promise. One afternoon, he was having coffee in Seattle with a potential investment. A young woman who'd built an education platform for underserved communities. She was brilliant, passionate, reminded him of himself 15 years ago. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't need the money. You don't need another company in your portfolio. So why?" Ethan thought about it. "Because someone should have done it for me, and no one did. So now I do it for others." "That's it?" "That's it," she smiled. "That's a good reason." They shook hands. He wrote the check. Another company funded. Another person given a chance. As he walked back to his office, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. But something made him pick up. "Hello?" Silence. Then breathing. Then a voice he hadn't heard in years. "Ethan, it's Dad." The word felt wrong. Foreign. Like a language he used to speak but had forgotten. "What do you want, Robert?" "I'm sick. Cancer. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months." Ethan stopped walking. Stood on the Seattle sidewalk while people flowed around him. "I'm sorry to hear that. I don't have insurance. Can't afford treatment. I was wondering, hoping, if you might help." There it was. Even dying, still asking for money. still believing Ethan owed him something. "No, please. I'm your father. You were a sperm donor. That's all you ever were." "That's cruel. So was sleeping with my wife. So was spending years taking my money and giving nothing back. So was every choice you made that put yourself first and everyone else last." Robert's breathing got heavier. "I know I wasn't perfect. I made mistakes. But I'm dying. Doesn't that mean anything? It means you're facing the consequences of a lifetime of choices, just like everyone else. So you're going to let me die? You're going to die regardless. Whether I pay for treatment or not, cancer doesn't care about money. But I could have more time, better time, less pain." Ethan closed his eyes, thought about his mother, about the hospital bills that had buried them, about working 70-hour weeks to keep her comfortable in those final months. Robert hadn't visited much, had said it was too depressing. "You could have had more time with Mom," Ethan said quietly. "You chose not to. You could have worked harder, provided better, been someone she could rely on. You chose not to. You could have been a father I respected. You chose to sleep with my wife instead. I was weak. I made mistakes. You made choices. Own them. Please, I'm begging. You should have thought about that before you betrayed me, before you built a fake life with my money, before you taught me that family loyalty only flows one direction. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I know I don't deserve help, but I'm asking anyway. Please." Ethan opened his eyes, looked at the city around him, all these people living their lives, making their choices, facing their consequences. "Goodbye, Robert." He hung up, blocked the number, stood there for a moment feeling nothing. No guilt, no satisfaction, just a quiet sense of completion. That chapter was closed, had been closed for years. This was just making it official. He walked back to his office and got back to work. Robert died 4 months later. Ethan learned about it from an obituary he found online. One paragraph. No photo. No survivors listed. He didn't go to the funeral, didn't send flowers, didn't acknowledge it at all. Some people might have called that cruel. Might have said he should have been the bigger person, should have forgiven. But Ethan had learned something important over the years. Forgiveness isn't mandatory, and being family doesn't mean you're entitled to someone's grace, especially when you've spent years proving you don't deserve it. Robert had made his choices, had lived with their consequences, had died the same way he'd lived, believing the world owed him something it never did. Ethan felt nothing about his death, no relief, no regret, just the quiet acknowledgement that a chapter of his life was finished. He kept building, kept investing, kept creating opportunities for people who reminded him of that kid he'd been, hungry, driven, willing to work for something real. The foundation grew. The scholarship program expanded. More kids from neighborhoods like Cicero got chances they wouldn't have had otherwise. That was his father's real legacy, not what Robert had done, but what Ethan had built in spite of him. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's construction, building something so substantial that the person who doubted you becomes irrelevant. Not because you destroyed them, but because you outgrew them so completely they couldn't touch you if they tried. 10 years after the gala, a reporter reached out, writing a profile on successful tech founders, wanted to interview Ethan. They met at a coffee shop in Seattle. The reporter was young, eager, asked smart questions about the company, about the foundation, about Ethan's philosophy on business. Then, near the end, "I saw the video from the charity gala. That was you, right?" Ethan nodded. "That must have been hard, going through that publicly." "It was necessary. Some people criticized you for it, said you humiliated your father unnecessarily, that you could have handled it privately." "Those people weren't sleeping with my wife," the reporter laughed. "Fair point, but looking back, do you regret how it went down?" Ethan thought about it, really thought about it. No, he finally said, because that moment, as ugly as it was, freed me. I spent years funding an illusion, propping up a man who didn't deserve it, staying in a marriage that was built on lies. That night, everything false burned away. What remained was real, and what remained was worth it. Everything that remained was worth it. The profile ran a month later. It was fair, balanced, mentioned the gala, but focused more on what Ethan had built after. The company, the foundation, the impact. The comments section filled up with people sharing their own stories, betrayals by family, by spouses, by people they'd trusted, and how they'd moved forward, how they'd built something better. Ethan read some of them, felt a strange kinship with these strangers, all of them learning the same hard lesson. Sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones you need protection from. But you survive, you build, you create something better than what was taken from you. That's how you win. Present day. Ethan stood in the St. Anthony's Hospital Education Wing, the one named after his mother. Watched nursing students studying in the library, using resources that didn't exist when he was a kid. The program director stood beside him. We've graduated 147 students since the program started. Nurses, doctors, physician assistants, all of them from families that couldn't have afforded it otherwise. That's good. More than good. You've changed lives. My mother changed my life. This is just paying it forward. They walked through the halls. Modern equipment, bright spaces, everything his mother deserved but never got. His phone buzzed. A text from his new CFO board meeting tomorrow. They want to discuss another acquisition offer. This one's $12 billion. Ethan typed back, "What do you think? I think it's your call, but I also think you've earned the right to cash out if you want." He looked around the education wing, at the students, at the opportunities being created. Let's hear them out, but I'm not ready to sell yet. Still work to do. Figured you'd say that. Ethan pocketed his phone. The director was talking about expansion plans, about partnering with other hospitals, about scaling the model. We'd need significant funding, she said. Another $10 million at least. You'll have it. Just like that? Just like that. She smiled. Your mother would be proud. She would have done more. I'm just trying to keep up. As he left the hospital, the sun was setting over Chicago. The city looked different now, less like a place he'd escaped from, more like a place he'd transcended while still honoring. His phone rang. His assistant. Ethan, there's a reporter asking about your father, about the anniversary of the video. They want a comment. Tell them I have no comment. Tell them that story ended a long time ago. Tell them I'm focused on what I'm building, not what I left behind. Will do. Also, you have dinner with the mayor tonight. She wants to discuss the education initiative you proposed. Right. I'll be there. He drove through the city, past Cicero, past Gold Coast, past all the places that used to mean something. Now they were just neighborhoods, just geography. The weight they'd carried, the shame, the anger, the betrayal, had evaporated. Left him light. Left him free. That was the real victory. Not the $1 billion, not the successful company, not even the look on Robert's face when everything fell apart. The victory was this: waking up every morning and building something that mattered, creating opportunities for people who needed them, living a life his mother would have been proud of. Robert had died believing he was a victim, believing the world had screwed him, believing his son had been cruel. He'd been wrong on all counts. Ethan hadn't been cruel. He'd been just. He'd been fair. He'd simply stopped enabling a man who'd never deserved the support in the first place. And the world hadn't screwed Robert. Robert had screwed himself. Through laziness, through entitlement, through a fundamental inability to take responsibility for his own life. That was the lesson. The one Ethan had learned through pain and betrayal and years of being used. You can't save people who don't want to save themselves. You can't fix people who refuse to admit they're broken. And you can't keep lighting yourself on fire to keep others warm. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for them, is to walk away. Let them face the consequences of their choices. Let them sink or swim on their own merit. It feels cruel in the moment, but it's actually mercy, the kind that creates space for real change, for real growth. Robert never changed, never grew. But that wasn't Ethan's failure. That was Robert's choice. Ethan had made different choices, better ones, and those choices had built a life worth living. That was enough. The dinner with the mayor went well. She was enthusiastic about the education initiative, promised city resources, partnerships, public support. "This could transform Chicago," she said over dessert. "Give kids opportunities they'd never have otherwise." "That's the idea. Can I ask what inspired it? Why you're so committed to this?" Ethan thought about his mother, about that wobbling table, about the thin walls and the cold apartment and the determination to be something more. "Because nobody gave me a chance when I needed one," he said. "I had to take it, claw for it, fight for every inch of progress, and I'm tired of watching other kids go through the same struggle when it doesn't have to be that way. So this is personal." "Everything worthwhile is personal," she smiled. "I like that. I'll remember it." After dinner, Ethan walked along the lakefront. November again. Cold and windy. The city lights reflected on the dark water. His phone buzzed. Another message, this time from Chloe's number. He'd never blocked it, never felt the need. "I heard about your dad. I'm sorry." He stared at the message, thought about responding, thought about all the things he could say. In the end, he just pocketed the phone. Some conversations weren't worth having. Some people weren't worth the energy. Chloe had made her choice. Robert had made his. Ethan had made his. Now they were all living with the results. That was fair. That was just. That was how the world was supposed to work. He walked until he couldn't feel his fingers. Then caught a car back to his hotel. Tomorrow he'd fly back to Seattle, back to work, back to building. That was his life now. Not complicated by people who took more than they gave, not burdened by obligations to those who'd proven unworthy. Just clean, simple, purposeful. He'd become exactly what his mother believed he could be, not despite Robert's failures, not in reaction to Chloe's betrayal, but in spite of both, beyond both. He'd transcended, and that, more than any revenge, more than any public humiliation, more than any amount of money, that was the ultimate victory. If you've ever had someone close to you use your success against you, or felt the sting of being betrayed by people you were supporting, drop a comment below. What would you have done differently? How do you balance loyalty to family with protecting yourself from people who only see you as a resource? And if this story hit home, if you know someone who needs to hear it, share it with them. Sometimes we all need the reminder that walking away from toxicity isn't cruel. It's survival. We're building something here, a collection of people who appreciate stories like this. Every subscription moves us closer to 1,000 subscribers. The next story might just be what you needed all along. Your name on that subscriber list matters. Will you be on it when we hit the goal?